Welcome back to another episode of APositive Insights. And today I'm joined by Guy Day from Kamal. Thanks so much for joining us, Guy.
No worries. Thanks, Darren. Enjoying. Look forward to having a chat.
Yeah, let's get this free-flowing chat going. So, good place to start is if you just give the listeners a background on yourself.
Yep, awesome. So look, obviously my name's Guy, and I'm CEO of Kamal, and we are a New Zealand-based recruitment technology platform or business. And I guess our whole reason for being is we are the only sort of AI business management partner for recruitment agencies. So what that means is essentially we're a tool for on the business activity rather than in the business activity. So where a lot of the sort of recruitment technology is focused on various aspects of the recruitment process, we're more about helping leaders and owners of recruitment businesses to navigate the on the business activity by serving up information in real time to be able to make quick decisions.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. So what was the moment you realised that the industry needed something like Kamal?
So to be fair, it was out of my own, I guess, frustrations of running an agency. So I guess prior to going full time with Kamal, I ran an agency over in New Zealand called Potentia. We were a tech recruitment business. And I guess when I took the role of MD, it became very clear to me that the way in which we were gathering information and pulling data together to be able to give me and our leadership team, I guess, real clarity on where we're at today and also where we're heading was just really clunky, if I'm honest. And so, we essentially went to market actually first to kind of see if there was anything like what Kamal is today in market and couldn't really see anything. So it prompted us to build it. And so built, I guess, a very early version for the Potentia business. And I guess, fast forward 2 years, this is where we are today.
Yeah, brilliant. So, what did you build it on previously? Was it like a Power BI product?
Yeah. So basically, the prototype was very much a dirty version of the product, and so Power BI was definitely involved there to kind of show the data. We built our own data warehouse within the business, and I guess built our own API integrations with our core systems. So we were using Bullhorn and Calmly and Xero in that instance. And so, basically experimented with the open APIs that we could access, gain access to that data, and then started to visualize stuff. And I guess the penny drop moment to kind of push this further was when I was starting to talk to other agency owners and leaders in New Zealand. There was it wasn't just that's interesting, and then carry on the conversation. There was like, and what do you mean by that? And actually that's something that I've or we have experienced in terms of a challenge. And I guess that then prompted us to look at this, and so myself and my co-founder Andrew, who is absolutely the technical smarts behind things. I am purely bringing the recruitment SME knowledge to it. We sat down and said, I think this is a go. So
No, great. And what's Andrew's background? Like, where's he come from?
Yeah, so Andrew's, Andrew would be arguably one of the, I suppose, smartest guys that I've ever met. That's for sure. So his background is data and data analytics and data science. So, he's come from startups. He's worked in enterprise. He's worked in consulting. He's also worked in educating and training data scientists. So it's a really broad background. And I suppose spent quite a bit of time in the Potentia business learning about how recruitment agencies worked. And I guess that knowledge that he's gained now on recruitment and being able to apply that in a technical construct alongside my understanding has really, married up quite nicely. And so, even he's sort of suggesting things now that, with regards to how we display things and how we look at things from his understanding of, the future recruitment and where it's heading.
Yeah, great. Dream team. Absolutely. Dream
team. Mate. That's as I say, it's make or break that, right? I think with any startup, the relationship between co-founders is the most important one, and everything else falls falls by the wayside otherwise.
Yeah, that's right. If you got a good foundation from the co-founders, that's where you need to obviously start. So, I suppose getting back to Kamal and the data, how can Kamal help change agencies' quality of data, and what are some of the misconceptions that agency owners have about their data?
Yeah. So maybe I'll answer that second part first. So I think the biggest thing that we hear, and I think is a genuine misconception, is, oh, I don't have data to work with, or the quality of my data isn't good enough for me to really start to leverage it or use it in a way that's going to be meaningful for me. And that's just not true. Like, regardless of, I think every single environment, and we've seen some crazy environments in terms of how agencies are using things, and even businesses where they're still doing manual timesheeting and things like that, and which is crazy to say, but it's still happening. And it's but actually, so long as they have got a system that they're capturing and running processes through, there's data to use and data to work with. And so I think, first thing I would say is, just because you may think your data quality is poor doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to start using what you do have and then use that as a foundation to build upon, to actually start to then go, okay, well, we've managed to pull this amount and this gives us this insight. What additional data set that can we focus to start to capture to then, add more value to that piece of information. So, I think that's the biggest one, is the barrier to starting, and so I'd say that's one. And I guess how Kamal helps, we provide a framework. So I think reporting, insights, analytics generally, you can report on anything, right? And I think the age-old thing is if you're reporting for reporting's sake, it's kind of pointless. If you need to be creating or pulling some information in a way that's going to lead to making a decision. And if you're just pulling numbers to look at it and go, well, that's great, and move on, how valuable is that actual number? So what I would definitely say with regards to Kamal is that we've kind of gone, okay, what are the things that matter to running a successful agency, whether that's across your financial metrics, across your sales metrics, across your operational metrics, and being able to then really understand, well, what does good look like? And I guess we've had a lot of conversations with buyers and sellers of agencies and the sort of the oracles of the industry, like the Greg Savages and the Ross Clinnets of the world, to be able to go, okay, what is foundationally good within the sector? Look at the different types of agencies, acknowledging that a high volume blue collar temp business versus an exec search firm will have very different things that they need to be looking at and tracking against. But being able to provide that foundational baseline to go, okay, this is what good looks like. Now, how do we actually work towards getting there? And then from a data capture standpoint, going, these are the things we need to pull and not worry about the noise.
Yeah. So I suppose it really, like, having clear data, clear live data would change the decisions you do make. But what would be some of the decisions owners could make?
Yeah, so I mean, I think maybe drawing upon the financial side first. I think that's always like the ultimate metric. I think in terms of an agency owner or a leader is those financial numbers. And I think if you're starting to look at things on a weekly or monthly basis, even it doesn't necessarily need to be daily, but basic things like your gross profitability per consultant, or your back office costs as a percentage of GP. As early warning signals around business performance and saying, if you're consistently seeing that gross profitability number go down, on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on how often you're tracking and capturing this stuff. It's those sorts of things that are really, really important to be able to front foot any decision making that needs to happen down the track, and vice versa. We've seen in our instances where the gross profitability numbers have increased quite significantly, and there's been a missed opportunity around hiring because they've seen more, but what they've not realized is that actually it ultimately meant that it started to plateau because the volume of customer base that was attracting that increased gross profitability, the current team couldn't handle it, and so things started to slip through the cracks. And it was a missed opportunity to go, well, that's a clear hiring trigger point when I'm starting to see those numbers. So I mean, there's so many examples I can provide, but I think that's kind of the things that you can start to really look at and have some confidence in and around your decision making, rather than going, I think the market's good enough to hire someone. Or actually, I think it's not going so well right now. Well, let's just hold the fort and see how we go. And then, 6 months down the line, go, I wish I'd made a call a little bit sooner.
So maybe get a little bit deeper into that then, like just that one trend. What would be the metrics that you'd look at to make a decision on hiring another consultant?
Yeah, so I think, look, definitely the understanding your cost base with regards to how much does it cost to have a recruiter sitting at the table. So your cost of seat essentially being that number. So that's a key one. So that if it's $8,000, a month, that you need to outlay to know that you're going to have a person sitting at the table or remotely or wherever they are, to be able to deliver. So that's your first thing, to know what that number looks like. The second thing is then to know, what's the current team doing, and are we seeing a trend of upward trajectory across those financial metrics, that GP one I just kind of talked about. But then starting to look at customer base. So, again, one of the things that we sort of really promote is understanding the makeup of your customer base over a period of time. So, take your overall number of active clients. Has that increased over that period of time, or has it decreased? And if it's increased, what's the reason for increase? Are we seeing a whole bunch of new clients coming on board? Is it a whole bunch of reactivation of customers that you may have not done some work with quite a while ago, and now all of a sudden you are? And if you're starting to see that net overall increase of customer base increase, it is an indicator to go, we probably can hire someone. And taking it that one step further to go within that customer base, which segments are growing, which industries, which sectors. If you're a generalist agency and all of a sudden you're seeing the energy sector or the mining sector starting to grow, and in understanding, okay, well, this is clearly a signal to know that if we were to maybe hire someone into that space, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to hit the ground running because there's customers for them to go at. We're going to be able to apportion the customers as well, and we're not going to eat into someone else's lunch in the company, and gives them that foundation to really hit the ground running first. And we're on a bit of a mission at the moment to get to a point where we can start to really present information around how long does it take for a consultant to be profitable. And our view that would be one of the ultimate metrics that we could show. And if we're able to start to capture, when it is that someone comes on board, and with some of the decision making that sat behind that, to go, well, because they came on board with this information, there's a customer base there's an industry that's growing, the overall gross profitability of your business is increasing. We've seen this on average mean that they're profitable within X months. On the flip side, going, if you don't have that and you've gone finger in the air, it's real hit and miss, and it may take you, double the time or whatever. So I know that's a long-winded answer to a short question, but I think
no, it's insightful.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's really good. Like, one of the ones we wanted to ask today was, like, there would be, I suppose, common metrics that matter far less than what people think. Like, can you give us a few examples that people really focus on, but they don't really matter as much?
Yeah. Look, I think I'll talk about one financial one again, and then I'll talk about, I guess, the recruiter activity one. So, financial revenue. Still see it to this day that the most important thing that's looked at is revenue, and it is such a false economy in recruitment, as we know. Look, if you're running a pure play perm business, fine. Revenue in the end will still be a relevant number, because ultimately that revenue number is your gross profitability. So that's doable. But for the majority of businesses that will have a contracting temp, some sort of contingent labor force built into their model, revenue just becomes a really irrelevant and a dangerous number to track, because you're not really seeing what's under the hood and how much of that is actually yours. And things that can start to happen is you misalign in terms of, okay, our revenue's going up, but our profitability starts to stagnate. And if you're constantly looking at the revenue line and you're not looking at that bottom line and really, analyzing that, it can sometimes be too late to miss out on understanding where there's been margin erosion or whatever it is that's been the factor around that. So I'd say that's a big one. And then the other one on the recruiter side, look, I think the standard kind of like KPIs and the funnel of, okay, number of calls to number of meetings to number of jobs to, number of submittals to interviews to placements, right? They're all important metrics and they're all important things to capture. But still, I'm seeing too many agencies capture those numbers for numbers' sake. And there's a lot of gamification with those numbers, which is fine. And I think it's important to engage and get the team excited about, activity and doing the activity. But not often enough are we seeing agencies not look at those numbers just on the basis of, well, have they hit the numbers? It's what actually sits behind those numbers to go, well, these are the things that this consultant has done. And that's the result. It's out, it's delivered. So what can we do to increase that result? It may not necessarily mean just do more. And again, I'm kind of pinching a little bit from some of Greg's narrative here in terms of how he sees the world. But, just that classic manager saying, well, just do more activity to lead more results. It just doesn't yield. And it is a broken record thing to say, but it is just, unfortunately, we're still seeing that in and amongst clients and customers that we talk to, that there's still that kind of level of maturity around using data in that way.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, and look, and there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
I mean, it's the personal thing to say, oh, I'll make that one extra phone call a day. That's great. I think there's still value in that. Don't get me wrong. But when you're looking at it from a top-down perspective, as you say, the strategic lens, it's like, well, yeah, that's not going to be the thing that's going to give you true actionable insight, I guess.
Yeah. So I suppose, what outcomes would you focus on through the data for a consultant specifically?
Yeah. So I think understanding that consultant's cadence and rhythm is the first thing. So, again, putting a completely new consultant aside, right? A brand new, someone to the industry that does not know anything about how to run a recruitment desk, you need to give them the foundations, right? You need to give them the core around this kind of volume of activity leads to this, to this, to this, right? To give them, but once they're in and once they've been in the seat for a period of time, it's not a cookie cutter, right? It's not one size fits all, and certainly isn't when you start to look at all different industries and sectors, right? What a legal recruiter does versus a high volume temp recruiter, and acknowledging that in some businesses they have both types. The management styles around that and what to look at will be completely different. So I always look at it on the basis of saying, yeah, what is that? What's actually achieved? What is the number, I guess, that they've delivered in terms of their billings, their revenue, their targets, whatever it is that you're tracking, and then looking back and going, well, this is all the activities that have associated with that number, and going, well, as a manager and as a leader, you'll most likely very easily be able to see when you start to look at the ratios of those activities to see where the gaps are, and to say, look, you're just not doing enough. You're just not meeting enough people, or actually your conversion rate from that interview to second interview is just not where it needs to be. And so there's clearly something happening with regards to you getting people in front of your client.
Yeah.
But, you're amazing at selling that individual and bringing them to the table, but not enough of those people are actually going through to that second stage of interview. And so therefore, is there something around, the capability of understanding the skill sets that you're recruiting for, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's allowing for that kind of next layer down and uncovering why. But I think the challenge is it's hard. And I think, again, kind of putting my Kamal hat in terms of the product, one of the things we're trying to also help solve for is that billing manager role, because it's the hardest role in recruitment, right? Like, I think trying to bill and deliver your own targets plus help your team hit their numbers, a lot of this stuff requires time to actually analyze and look at. And let's be real, who has the time when they're running a high volume temp desk, for example, to go and sit down and analyze these numbers and really pull this stuff together. So again, we're really trying to help, sort of bring up that information a lot faster, so that when a one-on-one does happen with a team member, that they're able to hit impactful things from right at the start, rather than having to kind of dance around and find where the information and find where the gaps are, to then be able to make an improvement on what it is they're trying to improve.
So I suppose, like, from an agency owner's point of view, what does good data look like?
Yeah. So look, I think as I mentioned, the first thing is every agency has some volume of data to work with to start to explore and understand how to move in a more positive direction, and so, but I always would say is, if you're looking at analytics or data, step away from the data and go, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What do you want to find out? What do you want to know? Like, what are the key drivers to go and look at something or go and find that particular data set or data source? Is it because you want to, understand how you can eke out more profitability in your business? Is it that you want to be able to provide a BD list to a new consultant coming on board? What is the goal? And then working back from that point to go, okay, what data do I need to pull that? What do I have today? What don't I have? And what are the steps I can do to be able to get that information in? And I think what's exciting is this is where AI does have a part to play. Obviously, I think the note-taking tools, the video conferencing tools, the screening tools, all that stuff really starts to help populate the information in the databases and the ATSs. So then, the way in which you capture that data becomes a lot easier, and you're less reliant upon consultants putting stuff in. And we know that most of them are pretty useless at doing that. So yeah, that would be a big one. So rather than, as I say, looking at it from what data should I have, it's like, well, what am I trying to solve for? What's the specific business problem that I want to look at here, and then work out what it is I do have, and then what's missing, and how do I get that information?
What's the difference between an agency that does have good data and one that doesn't?
So I think, and this is a bold statement, but I think any agency that is flying blind, i.e. just running and not using data to make decisions, is at massive risk of being swallowed up by the speed of change in our industry. So, the realities are that margins are getting squeezed and continue to get squeezed. And even in markets where, things are booming, the real focus for agencies is let me rephrase. I might just have my phone ring, so hold on. Let me pause that. I was like, no. Oh, that's so good. Can you ask that question again, and then we'll throw that in again?
Yeah, of course.
That's so annoying.
I went to drink a water from these meeting rooms that had already been opened.
Yeah.
Did I open that?
Love that.
Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just rephrase that or reframe that question. Like, what's the difference between an agency that has good data versus one that doesn't?
Yeah. So, look, I think it's about future-proofing yourself as an agency. That would be my sort of true belief here. I think the world has changed now, and the pressures that are being applied on recruitment agencies generally across from candidates and from clients, and acknowledging that tools and things that are becoming available to both candidates and clients are starting to eat into a whole bunch of the processes around recruitment. And look, I believe, foundationally, the value of recruitment remains. And, I actually think that with AI, recruiters are going to come out a lot stronger. But and that's a topic for another time. But the most important thing is to actually know how your business is performing and know what levers to pull to be able to always stay one step ahead. So if you're not using data, you're just guessing and hoping that the current model and the current structure continues to work. And it may, don't get me wrong, there are agencies that you're maybe a lifestyle business or you've just always run the way you have and you found a niche and happy days. But the reality is most agencies, if you talk to agency owners, and I'm sure, I'm not speaking out of turn here, most have seen a significant shift and have required to think differently about how they run and manage their businesses.
Like, it's interesting. I find it really interesting. Like, we obviously speak to a lot of agency owners, and some of them have no idea around margins on their clients until the end of the year. Like, when they do their end of financial year reporting, they look like they look back, they're not actually looking at it on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, even a cash flow forecast. Like there's minimal cash flow forecasting happening.
Yeah.
And it always just blows my mind. Like you say, just being one step ahead by having that clear data to make decisions.
Yeah.
Like when we go for a conversation around, talking about funding, like what's the tipping point? You're self-funded at the moment. What's the tipping point when you're going to need funding? They have no idea.
No.
What client pays late? They have no idea what the impact may be.
Yep.
And like that is that's such an important thing to have visibility of. But like just having visibility of a number of sort of data points in the business to make key decisions throughout the year rather than making it reactively. So being proactive.
Totally. And I actually, whilst there are businesses and certainly bigger agencies that will have big support teams, right? Finance and operations and payroll and all the rest of it. And I think fundamentally, though, I think the owners and leaders and operators need to know this stuff and they need to be comfortable with this stuff. I think just palming it off to someone else, saying, "Well, I've got someone else looking after that for me," and they'll come to me when there's a challenge or when there's a risk. I again, personal opinion on it. I think if you're not looking at the stuff yourself and using this as the foundation for strategic decision making right at the top, then you're missing a trick. So you may not need to get into the weeds of daily cash flow forecasting and that sort of stuff, but actually being across the trend and behaviors and where it's heading and where it has been, and really factoring that into your thinking around, okay, well, what am I going to do next with my business? That's probably the bit that I think is really, really important.
What are agency owners like? What do they need to be aware of? I suppose, like, what are some of the early warning signs that they often miss?
Yeah, so I think, and maybe I'll speak specifically to the New Zealand market. I suppose I can talk to my own personal experience of being in a tech recruitment business when just post COVID it went nuts, and every single business was hiring or looking for tech talent, and so the candidate short nature it just flipped the script. It was no longer a job focus. There were jobs for Africa in terms of the market. It was about finding great talent, but there was a tipping point, and at that point in time, we didn't have a Kamal, and so we were kind of still operating in the way that it was like very candidate short, and there would be jobs, and it was about 2 or 3 months down the road when we started to realize that actually processes were stopping. So people were still meeting people. So what was happening was we were able to still get interviews happening, but that conversion rate from interview to second interview, and then specifically second interview or third interview to placement, dropped off a cliff because there was uncertainty that had been started to drop in, and so therefore the hiring strategies and behaviors had changed. Now, had we looked at this stuff a little bit closer and seen some of that visibility, which we would have done, we would have been able to see that in those numbers pretty clearly, it would have given us a little bit of a head start to go, hold on, team, like we can see things are changing here. So pull the brakes a little bit in terms of constantly talent pooling. I think we need to get back out and start talking to our clients a bit more and start to be a little bit more job focused in the way that we're operating. And, so I think that's that early warning signal stuff is, and it's sometimes hard to find, again, acknowledging you need the data to be able to do that, but thinking like those top line key shifts in market, again, what is the data that I could use to better understand and see if I can capture that early?
So how about in the current market, like where are agency owners getting blindsided?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. So I reckon, and I know people have said this before, but there are so many bubbles and pockets at the moment with regards to the industry that there isn't just one kind of like narrative. I get the sense that you've got agencies that are scaling, growing fast, and I guess where they're getting blindsided at the moment is just making sure that they're scaling in at the right speed and ensuring that they're not getting ahead of themselves in terms of the demands and what they're seeing. So, a couple of months of uptick in revenue or in placement numbers, and using that as the trigger point to go, what we need to, and the sentiment is things are getting better and we should hire. Like, that would be a risk, I think, that we're seeing, and some mistakes that agencies are making, where all of a sudden that, the narrative has shifted, and therefore those hires that they made, there's some uncertainty around that. But then on the flip side, in a downturn, I think there's also been agencies that have probably been too aggressive in their thinking. And when there's been some major changes to the market that they're operating in, and making some pretty big calls around team structures and things like commission structures and all the various different things to help, I guess, consolidate and navigate that challenge. Again, going a little bit too hard, because they may have read into or looked at things too narrowly with regards to the now, and forgotten that things are cyclical. And of course, you need to make sure you can support yourself as a business. But we know recruitment's one of those things where when it's good, it's good, and when it's tough, it's about holding the fort, right? To know that the next time, or the next good time, will come around, and making sure that you're not jumping to sort of decisions that they're going to put you on the back foot when things start to pick up again.
Yeah, that sounds like my crypto investing.
Yeah, that's it.
It sounds very similar.
Buying on the up and selling on the down, right?
Yeah. I definitely try not to do that.
Yeah.
So I know, like, not to change the subject completely, but one of the things we talked about on and off is around contractors. So, hearing a lot of agencies, they struggle whether to prioritize redeploying their current contractors, bringing in new ones. But from data, what are you seeing? Like, what should the approach be here?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good one, because this is where there's often hidden easy wins, is what I would say. So, managing your contractor base and temp base, regardless, whatever the contingent workforce that you're operating with, and really making sure that you are on top of extension management and redeployment as much as possible, knowing that if someone has been a contractor or a temp with you before and it's been a success, knowing that is a much higher likelihood of that person finding another role and staying with you and sticking with you for time and time again. And really starting to track things like utilization. So this is the big one, and kind of taking the lens that sits in professional consulting world around how utilized is your benched resource. Of course, in the contractor land, they're not your employees necessarily. They may be, there may be mixtures of that in terms of some of the structures that agencies run, but most of the time they're independent contractors or temporaries or casuals, and going, well, actually, how can I make sure that I am keeping them as utilized as possible, and also tracking, based on trends, which skill sets and which types of resources are actually more utilized, so that you can double down in that area. And an example that I always bring up is an agency that we work with that has done a lot within the electricians and Sparky sort of space. They had turned on Kamal, and we saw that there was a whole bunch of unlicensed plumbers that they'd actually been placing, and at a higher margin and for longer. And so they're actually more utilized than, I guess, the skill set that they were famous for. And it didn't mean, obviously, turning that all off and switching it, but it just meant a pivot to go, well, actually, we know if we find more unlicensed plumbers, which is easier to find than qualified electricians, we are generally going to be able to place them into jobs at a higher margin for longer. And I guess that's once you start to capture that stuff and track that stuff, that's really when you can start to see, percentage changes on the bottom line eventually.
Yeah. Oh, it's an amazing way to prioritize.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe just another one as well, which I think is quite topical for some agencies. So, we've seen again pressures from enterprise clients and customers where we're starting to put cliffs on contractor margin. So, basically shifting to payroll only after 12 months or even sooner or a little bit longer. And so, again, acknowledging that when you've had a full margin contractor in the business for a year, and then that contractor is dropping to payroll only, you're not tracking that and capturing that and actually, putting a status against that contractor to say that they were actually a full margin contractor and now they're not. That's actually lost revenue. It's very different when they came on board as a payroller because, there wasn't the work done. They weren't really your contractor. And I guess as a payroller, it's the reverse to be able to potentially turn them into a full margin contractor down the track. But really making sure that you're capturing and understanding what percentage of your book is actually made up of those who've dropped to payroll. And those are the first people that you should be looking to redeploy. Because, fundamentally that model of saying you've been paid enough now, and therefore we need to pay you less, there's not many other industries where that happens. And so, there's the commercial realities around that to say, yes, of course, you need to make sure you do right by your clients. But at the same time, it's acknowledging that if you're continually losing contractors to that model, it's not going to be sustainable for very long.
Yeah, I've not seen this model that much actually. Is there any specific industries where that is?
Yeah, I think. Look, again, the New Zealand market. So the government contract that was negotiated here. That's something that we've seen. We've seen that in technology contracting. So some of the big insurance companies and banks in Australia and in New Zealand putting in those cliffs. Obviously, look, the temping world, it's not something that really happens. But I know that obviously the in the temping world, it's very much continually reviewing rates, and it can sometimes be a bit of a race to the bottom. So whilst it's slightly different, it's also being very mindful that when is it not worth it to push those rates down. But yeah, it's something we're seeing more and more of in the contracting world, where that mindset of, it's almost like the fee mindset, with a permanent employee, you get paid because you place them. It's kind of a similar mindset. So, well, with a contractor, you get X, and then once you've had your fee, so be it.
Payroll only.
Yeah.
What's the typical margins you see on payroll only?
That's a good question. That's a really wide ranging. I mean, look, the minimum that we've seen things go down to some crazy numbers like $4 a day or $2 a day, like type payroll numbers, which is personally I think is just not, unless you're running a fully automated end-to-end process where no one's touching that process and there's no human intervention. I don't know how you can actually turn that into something that makes sense. But look, I mean, generally, if you think about a standard sort of percentage margin on contract being anywhere between 15 and 20%, as kind of like your average, your payroll is probably coming in between 5 and 8%, something like that.
Yeah, we're seeing similar. We sort of see average 14 to 17% across every industry. I've even seen as high as 10 to 12% for payroll only.
Yeah, and that's, and again, and I think that's where, negotiating that stuff, and also, making sure that when you're negotiating those contracts, like what's included in the payroll only scenario. Because if there is any candidate care, contractor management, any of those things that's the part of the service that we as recruitment agencies provide, like making sure that if they're getting a bargain bin deal to just payroll them, you just payroll them, and really make that very clear to say, well, if you want anything else, that's the value add part of our service that you pay for, and making sure that that's captured in the agreement,
Yeah, that's right. It definitely goes back to the value sell.
Yeah.
What do you wish more leaders understood about their performance data?
For me, I wish every agency owner is at least willing to think about changing the way they do things, or be willing to look at information and not just look at it and go, oh, that's interesting, and then just carry on as if they've not seen it, right? Which is just so common, which is why most reporting, so many people that spin up a report say, oh, can you build me this? Can you make me this report? I'm really interested to know, like, what's our current number of customers that we're working with, and what's our average placement fee, and what's our this, that, everything else. And it's a one-off thing. I go, oh, that's really cool. Okay, nice. We probably should really increase that. Puts it down, and then never looked at it again. Like, never looked at it again. It's like
12 months later, you check in with them.
Yeah, oh, that's right. It's the same. That's what it's done down. Like, it's like, oh, great. And again, I mean, massive generalization. Of course, there are people out there looking at the stuff a bit more, but I guess that would be my I guess wish, is that everyone is really being willing to be a little bit more granular and get out of the weeds, right? Get into, again, the premise of what Kamal is on the business, looking at your business for the business sake, not in the business activity. Think of yourself as a business, as a professional services company. I'm coming in and looking at this as that and going, what are the things that I can do and use data for to make this professional services organization better?
So looking into the future, what do you think recruitment firms will be tracking over the next few years that they're probably not tracking now?
Yeah, so I think the first one is the return of, or the ROI on AI. That's the big one. And the reality of where is it that AI is actually making an impact versus just noise. And I think we're still far too early in the journey of understanding the true impact of AI in our space. I think it's the classic curve, right, of the hype curve. And I think we're still on some level of that hype curve before it settles and finds a balanced zone. And from there, I think that's when we hit that balance zone to kind of know, okay, if we implement this kind of tool, it's going to lead to X return, and being able to track that and track that from implementation through to usage to then go, what has the difference been by plugging in this particular tool to my team to ultimately see a return on that product. So I think that's a big one.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, and that will continue to evolve. Look, I think the other thing that agencies will continue to sort of look at is, I think historically, the concept of like the breakup of a CRM versus an ATS. Most agencies still, they live in ATS land, right? It's and all the business development and sales activity and all that sort of stuff is still captured in the ATS, and certain ATSs have a CRM element to it, but proper, I guess, lead gen, sales funnels, like that sort of stuff hasn't historically been the way that recruitment's been run or done. It's heavily relationship based. It's kind of follow your nose. It's see where I'm winning and then see if I can win some more over there. I think there's actually going to be a lot more in the tracking of, okay, the more front of the funnel stuff, the marketing and the value of marketing, and then the value of lead gen and moving through funnels, with regards to getting clients from cold to warm, even before a job even exists. And I think just spending more time in that space, and I'm seeing agencies jump on the the HubSpot journey, or actually start to have the 4 systems now, right, where it's a CRM and an ATS, and then your timesheet, payroll, and your finance in terms of your core, and obviously other add-ons. But yeah, I think that's another one that will be interesting to see over time. Yeah,
great. I've definitely got a number of AI tools I use, and I could probably be confident I don't know what the return is.
Yeah.
So far. I mentioned the Fixer one that manages my emails. I do get an email each week that tells me how many hours I've saved drafting and replying to emails, which I suppose gives me good insight. But everything else, it probably takes me more time putting my expenses in than it's potentially saving me time.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really powerful one.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like future ready recruitment businesses, like what would it look like from a metric standpoint moving forward?
So if I was, and I think I'll flip that. If I was to start an agency again today, I think that's a good way to kind of put it, right? In terms of how would you structure things to ensure you're fit for what's happening now and into the future. And I think first things first is going, what am I trying to build? So am I building a lifestyle recruitment business, or am I building a business to scale and eventually maybe sell? And making it very clear in my own mind what that looks like. Because if I'm building a lifestyle business, what I'm going to be future fit for is completely different to if I'm trying to scale an agency to exit. Yeah. So, that would be my first thing. And then the second thing is pick the metrics that are going to help you get to that goal. And talk to people, talk to those who know, talk to those who are constantly looking at this stuff. Obviously we're one of those businesses that's constantly trying to add value, but again, there are other players in the market that go, well, these are the things you should look at and track if you're looking to achieve this goal. And those metrics can range, but I always say it's about bringing things to putting a financial lens on your metrics versus sales, operations, those sorts of ones, which should always be second in the hero numbers to your true financial return. Okay,
maybe break it down then. I'm starting a lifestyle business. What are the top 3 metrics?
Money in the bank. So, that would be, if I'm starting a lifestyle business, I would be looking at how can I be as ruthlessly efficient as I can be to be able to return, because ultimately I know I will have nothing to sell, because the value is in me as a human and as a person and my relationship. So therefore I need to make sure that I am seeing as much of the return in that business for the time that I'm running it. And so it's being super efficient, super lean, and just trading on your own capabilities. That would be versus a business that you're setting up to scale. You really need to invest in the foundations. So knowing that it's going to take you more time to generate the numbers that you want to generate, and investing up front to say you want to set your systems up, your processes up, to say you might be 1 or 2 people to start with, but you want to make sure the systems that you're picking are going to allow you to scale to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 heads, whatever those goals are, and really making sure that you're picking that, and then aligning those numbers and metrics accordingly. So temp focused business, looking at things like utilization of your workforce, all those sorts of things very early doors, and managing against those trends, versus an exec search firm and making sure that your ratios of success are maintaining at 100%, when it comes to your fill rates and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose scaling a recruitment agency moving forward in the future is potentially not scaling the headcount internally. This is more about scaling the contractor book and the firm placements you're making.
Yep. I think we're definitely in a position where heads is not that's not the thing that determines scale so much anymore. Yep. And that's right across a lot of industries at the moment. So, but absolutely in recruitment. So you're right, man. I think one person now could quite comfortably manage hundreds of temps or contractors with the support and the tools behind them.
I actually saw some stats this week. 35% of agencies in recruitment are owner operated, and 85% of the market has 9 or less employees. Like, I was actually blind. I was like, this can't be true.
Yep.
It really can't be true. Like, I was looking at the UK stats, and 80% of agencies have 10 or less.
Yep.
So the way the market's going, it's definitely smaller, leaner, tech-driven businesses.
Yes, exactly, and allowing you to move fast. And we've seen the impact on the globals. Right, the globals have had a real tough time of it, and that's no fault of theirs, other than they've scaled businesses in a time where size and scale was the thing. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, but even now, seeing that those globals are breaking things down into specializations, into different business units, into different profit centers, ultimately, to be able to kind of mirror that exact trend, as you say.
What's the one piece of advice you'd give an agency owner?
Don't be afraid to look at the data and look at your numbers. Don't be afraid of it. You may not understand everything that sits behind it, but just start to experiment and play with what is it that this number or this bit of data can tell me about how I'm going to move my business forward.
Great advice. Awesome chatting to you, Guy. Appreciate your time.
You too, mate. Thank you. I'm sure
Thanks
we'll catch up again soon. All right.
Well, talk to you soon. Cheers, Guy.
Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Hope you found it insightful. So APositive, we specialise in partnering with recruitment and labour hire businesses across Australia, New Zealand, and soon to be the UK. Whether you're starting, scaling, or an existing business, we're here to support you. Back office, payroll, funding, and payment options. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Come to our website at apositive.com.au. Thanks again.